Welcome to the Hoot podcast, where we feature customers, partners, industry influencers in the IT infrastructure and operations space to discuss DevOps, SecOps, logging, observability, and everything in between. I am Ashish Chakrabarti, Technical Marketing Engineer here at Humio, a CrowdStrike company. In today's episode, we are fortunate to have Sameer Vasanthapuram, who is a Principal Solutions Architect for Security at Amazon Web Services. Sameer works with AWS network and security partners to architect and build new products and solutions on the AWS for customers. Sameer has previously worked with Fortune 500 customers to design, build, and implement large secure networks. We are fortunate to have him with us here at the Hoot. Sameer is also presenting at the Advanced Log Management course Spring 22 session. We look forward to his thoughts during this podcast. Hi Sameer, welcome
Yeah,
to the Hoot. It's exciting to have you here. Our listeners would want to know more about your career journey. Could you share some insights into that?
Hey Ashish, thanks for having me on. It's good to hear what you guys are doing, and in terms of what I've been doing, I started off as sort of a network person in network engineering. So I was building large scale networks for large enterprise customers, and so this was to connect, think of all the pharmacies and the gas stations that you guys have gone to, and how do the actual card payments go through. So a lot of the networks I helped design and build, and then that evolved into understanding the complexity of like the PCI standard when you're processing that many transactions, and so got my first hands on PCI requirements as it pertains to operating these networks, and then dove into security there, which led me down the path of exploring how does application security work, how does web security work. So I went and worked for a CDN, so got a little bit more up the stack, and then I wanted to go build an actual security solution. So I worked with another product folks that made security software. And then, funny enough, a small place called AWS was starting to do different things, and it was so easy to use, and it felt like, this is where things might go. Just given like click a button and you get a server. So moved here and been dabbling in cloud security, and trying to figure out how this whole thing works now.
Nice. Yeah, I think one aspect that you and me both have in common is that we belong to the security community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After graduating from my university, the first job that I had was a security analyst, and that too a part of the blue team. It's like getting into a room blindfolded, not
Right.
knowing where the attack is coming from.
Yep.
And um, and one thing that really frustrated me back then was the lack of logs, the lack of visibility, because the company that I was working for was very organic.
Yeah.
There were these blind spots that I didn't have any visibility in.
Mm-hmm.
So that used to frustrate me so much because I couldn't then do my job. I couldn't,
Yeah.
complete any analysis, any investigation that I was assigned as part of the blue team. So thank you so much for sharing that information.
No,
Uh,
happy.
and so on that same topic, I remember in one of our previous reInvent, Werner Vogels, the CTO and VP of Amazon, um, he mentioned that it is very important for customers to log everything.
Yeah.
How have you seen log management evolve over the years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I can certainly echo sort of the sentiments you had around not having enough logs. I was actually, trying to figure out, when was the first time I started using logs, and it was to do a lot of troubleshooting. And to your point, sometimes you never had this ability to find stuff out. But in terms of the history of logs and how I viewed it, I think it started off as a very focused sort of solution for identifying things for forensics or reporting and things like that. And it was just sort of a log management system, which is very specific to, I think syslog started off as something that was built for handling errors from the mail, the MTS service, which was pretty complex, right? But then that use case then sort of exploded because syslog had these different fields, and so you had these different information types you can sort of segregate your logs into, and that's the whole syslog era. And the focus then became, to your point and mine, they're being used for incidents, right? So all of these logs were moving from just information management to incident management, and so you saw this whole field of security incident and event management pop up, which is a whole seam space.
Right.
And you had these targeted sort of capabilities where you can filter on capabilities and do more event based, not both alerts and sort of collection of logs, and somehow focus on a little bit of the queries as well. I think that then morphed into, hey, I like the fact that I can get logs. I like the fact that I can parse it, but I want to do it on like everything, and I wanted it to be in sort of a free text format, right? And you saw sort of the open shift, I mean not open, the shift to open source with things like elk stacks, and moving elk stacks into the cloud and running it there. And as that happened, you now have this almost requirement, to your point, of now logging everything, because an incident is becoming much more complex because it's touching multiple entities, multiple server types, multiple applications, multiple data sources. And so you're starting to see this evolution into having all data sources be part of an incident, and you're seeing this morph into sort of the extended detection and remediation space, where you're also consolidating both event management stuff, but you're also adding this intelligence and sort of remediatory aspects of it. So you're seeing that seam sore and all that going away, and coming into this more intelligent sort of way of doing things.
So observability and monitoring, these have always been in a debate, right?
Yeah.
And always been at loggerheads. What do you want more? Do you want more
Yeah.
observability, or do you want to, have more monitoring?
Yeah.
What would be your personal insights into that?
Yeah, so I think it's a very, very good question. So if you think of it, when you observe something, you're trying to establish some sort of behavior, and I think monitoring is one function of it.
Right.
So monitoring means that typically you think of it as sort of a binary aspect of things. So you're either looking for something good, or you're looking for something bad, or you're looking for anomalies, versus observability, which is, hey, I'm observing this thing doing something, but I'm monitoring for its behavior in multiple areas. And so I think monitoring is one aspect of observability, but then you need these other aspects. People call it traceability, there's logging, and then how you use more sort of data on top of that, depending on your application, is then dependent on the business. So whether you want to do, like for a web application, you want to do real-time user monitoring, or you go down the path of doing tracing to understand request responses for performance monitoring of the application, things like that. But yeah, the debate, I think, still exists, but in my view, observability is a little bit more holistic than just monitoring.
Right. And you have deep experience in security yourself. So could you share some of the challenges that customers experienced when handling with logs, or threat hunting or forensics?
Yeah, I mean, so spot on, right? Like if you take the specific examples that you're talking about, like investigation, or the time you're spending on trying to figure out what's going wrong, is probably the most expensive time that anybody will spend when things are going wrong.
Right.
Um, and you're losing data, or your users are not getting to your application, whatnot. And so you add to that, these disparate teams building their own applications that are now just interacting with APIs. You don't have any standardized models for data. You don't have any standardized models of logging. You don't have any standardized models of traceability, and everybody's doing their own thing.
Right.
So I think the challenge then comes to how are you going to solve for that incident when you have these disparate data sources and disparate teams and disparate tools and things like that. And I see that as one of the biggest challenges. And to your point, having the lack of visibility and the lack of clarity of the data, what should I look for? Those are all things you shouldn't be doing during an incident. It's something that you should have considered even before time. And so when we talk to customers, we recommend that even if you have run books for an incident, like play them beforehand, and that should give you an idea of how to build your data models and things like that. So that's my spiel there.
No, 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 it makes sense. It's just mind-boggling to understand how much the field of, monitoring and real-time observability has just, evolved, over the years.
Yeah,
Back in, I think, when I was a security analyst, I didn't have as much visibility as I wanted to.
right.
But now you have, tools that provide you real-time observability into, not only your security devices, but also the entire infrastructure. So I think it's very, very valuable to to have that sort of visibility in your security operations.
Yep.
So could you list some of the benefits that some of your customers have told you, customers or partners have told you about, in including observability into their operations?
Yeah, so some of the things you can think about, right? For example, when you're looking at a holistic system, like if you take into consideration telemetry and telemetry of infrastructure, like you're saying, you can start identifying interesting things even for security incidents. So take like network CPU as telemetry data you're getting from infrastructure devices. Typically, you might see a pattern where you're using some baseline amount of CPU and some baseline amount of network. And so when you start seeing like crazy spikes with CPU and you're tying that with some activity within your monitoring agent that's detecting some behavior on changing things in the registry and things like that, you start to put together, hey, it's either somebody trying to spin up like a Bitcoin rig because there was this vulnerability, or you're starting to see network activity like peak because in a unidirectional fashion, which might be like, hey, am I undergoing some sort of a DDoS attack, or is this somebody like being a bad actor, or is it just somebody overwhelming the resource because somebody's pipeline broke?
Right.
So having all of that is incredibly valuable. And so the benefit of having this is they tell you a story, and that story can help you get to a lower mean time to detection, which is some of the, or if not the most critical aspect of an incident, it's probably one of the most critical aspects for customers when they're undergoing sort of their threat hunt or whatnot. So
Right.
yeah, having that helps for sure.
No, absolutely. Any particular war story or anything that you were part of as an incident that you would be comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little while back, and this was sort of a large streaming event that I was a part of, and sort of helping this customer stream this to a worldwide audience, and you started seeing as they went live, this peak in traffic, right? And then you have to figure out like how do you understand whether you just open the floodgates because you went live, or how do you understand that because you open the floodgates you're seeing more requests than you expected. And so understanding like the requests that come in which are legitimate versus not, and how do you identify patterns and what data do you look for to identify that becomes very crucial. And
Right.
so you have to tie in multiple pieces of information, like where are you making this event available in different regions? Are these IP addresses that you're connecting from users that are known bad actors? Are the devices that you're seeing traffic from actually legitimate devices that you support those streaming protocols for? So there's all of these different aspects that you would see. And so we went through that whole process because, of course, when you see a burst in activity, you're going to see a little bit of reduction in stream quality. And so it was a quick power on trying to establish what was actually going on that might cause some of the lags that we were seeing. So that's as deep as I can get on that, but it was pretty cool to go through that, but also needed to look at multiple different sources.
So now let's focus on the strategies and the tactics.
Sure.
So as a solution architect, what would you recommend your customers and partners do in order to achieve, let's say, agility, resilience, and scale?
So yeah, agility is going to be interesting, right? I think it's a combination of multiple things. The typical things that I talk about, and it's applicable for either development or even for security practitioners. I think you want to standardize on your tools, your mechanisms, your data models, so that way everybody understands sort of what they need to use, how do they need to instrument it, and how should they be reporting their different events to whoever, right? The second, and I think fundamental sort of concept that I like is to set and enforce like practical defaults.
Right.
Like fine tuning it and having people spend inordinate amount of time trying to configure like any tool is a waste of time in my opinion. I think it has to be intuitive enough where you set it, and if you enforce a good default, you're getting the ability to scale whatever function pretty easily. And in terms of just finally just responding to events, particularly like practice ahead of incidents. And I feel that's where the field of like chaos engineering is going to help a lot of customers. They're not paying as much attention there, but I think it'll really help them prepare for both utilizing logs, how to respond to it, like removing some of these lower level false positives and automating some of the more routine tasks, all of which enable you to your point, then build up on your resilience, right? Like when you know how to respond to, I'll give you an example. Like you do not need to have somebody checking a log that says that somebody's image has a vulnerable binary. Like you can automate that stuff and get away from having to poke the application owner or have the infrastructure team go do a reboot or a redo of the entire image and things like that. And so from a resilience standpoint, I think build an architect for failure. Like it is going to happen, and we have multiple mechanisms on AWS which we suggest. This can be operating across availability zones, planning for regional disasters, having some sort of an RTO and RPO, and sort of enforcing the right mechanisms to follow that. And scale follows all of this, right? You need to be agile and you need to be resilient to scale your application or your security itself.
You mentioned something about chaos engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Could you highlight more on this particular topic?
Yeah, chaos engineering is interesting, right? It emanated from some of the work that Netflix was doing with a tool called Chaos Monkey.
Okay.
And Chaos Monkey essentially just rips servers apart within the EC2 environment. In the sense, it's like shutting down stuff, it's changing configurations, and how do you respond to that? And so this was running on their infrastructure. This typically ran on their infrastructure all the time, which means they don't care if even a bunch of servers go down. They're still resilient enough for the application to handle those failures.
Right.
And you're architecting your services such, because then you're separating each of these components into microservices that are then separating the individual physical or infrastructure components into their own sort of stateless machines. So the ability for you to then engineer that sort of a service means that you're actually thinking about failure, you're planning for failure, you're practicing for it, and you know how your infrastructure and your service will run in the case of incidents.
Real-time observability now. How critical does this become for any customer?
It becomes a huge factor, right? So especially when you're thinking about building these teams of developers that are independently developing microservices, which all interact with each other for in the grand scheme of things, building an entire application, which means you need to have real-time observability across all of these services to understand what's actually impacting that application. And so, how do you then create the right tools for enabling that sort of observability when you have completely different architectures, languages being used, infrastructure being used, and still make it relevant for detections? It's going to become even more critical for customers as we go down this path of splitting up components into sub-functions.
Interesting. So Humio has kicked off its advanced log management course 22, and you are presenting in session 2, where our audiences will learn on how organizations can can achieve agility, resilience, and scalable using a centralized log management solution. We are getting heavy interests and a lot of signups for this event. Our Steve McMahon, who's the CIO and VP of operations, is also going to be speaking to this event. What will our audience look forward to listen from you?
Yeah, I think some of these themes are certainly interesting, right? So we touched upon a few of these. I think identifying how you can scale, be agile, be resilient, and how do we think of building such applications, and how do logs and observability play into that dimension, and how do you specifically use such data for handling security events, and how do you democratize that data for security teams and application teams? That I think is sort of what we might be discussing, and I'll try to focus on.
Nice.
Yeah, that's it's going to be a good one, hopefully.
So we are just beginning the year 2022. What are your predictions for log management?
Yeah, so I think it goes back full circle to what we started from, and that's the theme of logging everything. And the reason that you typically see that being a theme and an iterative theme is because you're going to see a lot of consolidation of both the functions of the folks that build applications. You're seeing this move of DevOps and DevSecOps, where teams are required to handle multiple things, where you're developing code but you're also operationalizing it and maintaining status, which means you need to understand how your application is behaving, the security aspects of it, how to respond and things like that. So giving them the ability to do that in a centralized way and an easy to deploy fashion, with the ability to not have to construct complex queries and do free form text searches that are easy to understand and write, and finally not being bound by any amount of restrictions on how much data you can retain and parse from, is going to be super crucial as we go into the next few years.
Observability and security. What are the benefits of adding real-time observability into security operations?
So I think most customers would say, their North Star metric for handling security incidents is mean time to detection. At least that's sort of how I would think of measuring myself if I was in an incident. And so having real-time observability means you sort of have this little bit of an early warning system, where you're starting to see traits in something else before you see the full picture. And so observability for security teams means they're looking at multiple data sets all of which may be interesting to them, and identifying patterns that might be either interesting for incident analysis or for going back and understanding behavior for baselining and things like that. And so I think it is going to become even more critical to ensure that your time to detection is lowered, because lateral movement and things like that are getting faster and faster. I think the last metric I saw is you have 12 minutes or 60 minutes to respond. I keep
Yeah.
using the numbers, but you don't have a lot of time to figure out the actual source of an incident. So you need to move quickly. And so this becomes very, very important.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today at the Hoot.
No, thank you for having me on. Was a pleasure meeting you, Akshay or Sheesh.
Yeah.
But it was great working on this together, and I hope we'll have more folks join us for the course.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of The Hoot. Do register for the Advanced Log Management course and its sessions on humio.com. Receive a certificate of completion and a badge for each session that you attend live. Learn more about Humio's and CrowdStrike's journey into the log management space at humio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Join our Slack channel at community.humio.com, where you can connect with peers or recommend a topic for future episodes. And please do not forget to tune into the future episodes of The Hoot. Thank you.